Greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house. Welcome, welcome to another edition of the Sister Shanice Show. I am absolutely delighted to have you in the house. Please welcome me, and let me know that you're in the house. Oh, it's a pleasure as always to be here live and direct on a Wednesday evening. So, greetings, and welcome. Come through the door, pull up a chair, get comfy on your sofa. As always, I've got a really interesting show for you this evening. And, I've been putting the work in just to make sure that, I've got. So that I can drill down in some aspects of our history for you. So today's going to be another really interesting episode. If you're just joining me for the first time today, where have you been? But welcome anyway. We're going through a series that we're calling The Ethnic Cleansing of Ireland. And I've been going through this book, To Hell or Barbados, the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. And I've been pointing out as I've been going through that what the book is actually talking about is us as Africans who were the original indigenous people of Ireland and who were cleared out of Ireland during the mid 17th century and sent to the Caribbean and the America. So if you're joining me once again, thank you so much for continuing to stay with me on this incredible journey that we are on, uncovering our history, so much history that has been hidden in plain sight. And today I'm in chapter 10 of the book. So we've been working our way through the chapters. We're on chapter 10, and we're going to be discovering, the extraordinary depth of the resilience and the courage and the determination of our ancestors to gain freedom. The freedom that we are enjoying today, the freedom that we are taking for granted today. Family, when you hear the stories, you will be under no illusion of the extent of the bravery, and the courage that our ancestors would have had during those times in order to free us from our enslavement. Because you see, we are made up of a people who decided that they would rather die fighting than live a life as a slave. They decided to take their destiny into their own hands. How many of you today, family, are prepared to take your destiny in your own hands and to create a future that is going to be beneficial for your children and your children's children? How much courage do you have to stand up and challenge the powers that be, challenge the current systems, that control our lives and everything that we do today? How much courage do you have to stand up? And when you hear of the punishment that our ancestors were likely to be faced with by standing up, you're going to realize, family, how easy we have it today. And so today's session is really one to highlight, and to give recognition to those resilient, courageous ancestors of ours, and also to remind us that the freedom that we enjoy today didn't come easy. It wasn't simply the passing of an act and we were free. Far from it. Our freedom was fought for, and a huge amount of blood and a huge amount of sacrifice went into fighting for our freedom. So we're going to be looking at that aspect of our history, and also we're going to be turning our attention to the remarkable, incredible life of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, because August is Mosiah month. This is the month that we call Mosiah, the month of Mosiah, the month of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, because he was actually born during this month. And so, he was an incredible, formidable organizer, business entrepreneur, philosopher. I mean, he speaker. You know, he has left us with a black print or a blueprint, whichever terminology you prefer to use. But basically, he's left us with a strategy that, if we follow, will give us the total independence that we need to have and that we are on the journey to getting as a people. So, you know, because of the bravery of those earlier ancestors of ours, you know, we've got to some extent freedom, to some extent we've been emancipated, to some extent, you know, we are, you know, have a lot more liberties today than we had in the past. But let's not begin for a minute to think that we are totally independent, that we are totally free, because we are not. There's still a work that needs to be accomplished, and it's our duty and our responsibility to complete that work, family. And so today, with the works of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, as we highlight that during the month of Mosiah, it's going to be a reminder to all of us that no matter how difficult we think the situation may be, there is a way, and the way is for us as a people to come together in unity and unity and oneness and in strength. And in so doing, we can create a new future for our children and our children's children. And that new future that we want for our future generations is one that has to be built. Yeah. And as we know, every building starts with one brick. Okay, so we're going to be continuing to follow the evidence. We're going to be continuing to uncover aspects of our history that's been buried. And at the same time, you know, we're going to be uncovering our shared history and some new nuances as well of that history. So family, as always, looking to a really interesting conversation with you today. As you come through the house, please let me know that you're in the house. I want to rise up Sister Kev, who was the first in the house today. Rise up, Sister Karen. Great to have you in the house. She's also sending healing vibrations and healing prayers to our beloved Dr. Clyde Winters. So yes, family, please do continue to send him those healing vibrations. Continue to send him to send him your prayers, because he needs it. Let me have a sip. And our Sister Kev is saying she's asking God to give him a quick recovery. Just going to get my tissue that I've dropped here back again. Rise up, Sister Kev. Great to have you in the house. And thank you for being the first one in the house today as well. We want to welcome our brother Kwame Oboche. Rise up, brother Kwame. Brother Kwame reached out to me in this strong, and he's like, Sister Shanice, you know, are you going to be talking about Marcus Mosiah Garvey? Yeah, I'm like, cause you requested it, of course I'm going to be. And, you know, this is the month of Mosiah. And so I can't go through this month, can I, and not talk about the great, imminent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He's shown us the way, but how many of us are actually following the way? Hey, brother Kwame. He's also sending out healing vibrations to Baba Winters as well. Thank you so much. Yes, we got Sister Adawa, Sister Betty in the house. Rise up, beloved. Great to have you in the house. Man overboard. Who's overboard? Rise up, family. We've got some members of our beautiful community in the house. Sister Karen's bigging up the kings and queens in the house. And yes, Brother Kwame, Baba Marcus Garvey was indeed the greatest Pan-African leader and hero in history, in our history. Absolutely. You know, he built the largest Black movement that the world has ever known during these times. And he did that when we didn't have any WhatsApp, we didn't have social media. You know, what he managed to accomplish is incredible. And we're going to be going into his story as well today. Oh, we've got my cousin Lynn watching all the way from Canada. Rise up, cousin Lynn. Great to have you in the house, cousin. And she's saying, keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Rise up, family. Let me just also welcome all of our family members. And let's drop this welcome banner. Where is it? There we go. Oh, yes. Let me drop this on as well. Please do like, share, and subscribe. If you're not already a member of this platform, please do subscribe. It'd be wonderful to have you join our family. And yeah, give us a thumbs up. And please do share this link to your family members so that I can welcome them on board to this channel. There's always so much that we have to talk about here on this channel. So wherever you're watching us from, we welcome you. We thank you so much for joining us. We don't take your involvement for granted. And for those of you who might want to support my works, yeah, please do like, share, and subscribe. And you can also join me on Patreon. Or if you want to send me a PayPal gift, you can. You just send that via PayPal to @tripwithsisterShanice, and I will get your love gift. But all the work I do, I'm not doing it for any finances at all whatsoever. I'm doing it for the love. I'm doing it because I believe that we as a people, have been given a history that has erased the truth of who we are as a people. And, we are incredible, phenomenal. There is so much greatness, that we have to talk about. It would take me 100 lifetimes to share the extent, the breadth, and the depth of our greatness, family. 100 lifetimes. That's how great our ancestors were, and that's how much works they've actually done, family. So welcome. So I'm going to, I think without further ado, let me just check if there's any more messages or anything that anyone in particular is asking of me. If not, I'm ready to go into today's presentation, because you know what it's like. The time goes so quickly, doesn't it? So I don't want to take up too much time. I want us to be able to have the time to go into our conversation. And what I need to do, I need to get YouTube on my phone as well, just to make sure that I'm coming out okay. All right. So it's one-man band around here. Yeah, I'm the author, I'm the script writer, I'm the producer, I'm the director, wearing all these different hats, just keep putting on all these. I'm the presenter, the co-presenter. Yeah, it's all going on around here, family, but it's all good. It's all good. If, it needs to be done, doesn't it? Absolutely needs to be done. So just putting myself on YouTube on the phone just to see that I'm coming out okay. Yeah, I can see that I'm there. And what I now want to do is share screen and bring up my presentation. So I want to make sure as well that is coming through okay as well. I'll put the voice on, but I don't think I'll be using that today. So I just want to take a look to make sure that you are seeing my presentation. The first slide is entitled "The Power of Determination, from Survival to Success." The power, family, of determination. I really hope that everyone that watches today's presentation recognizes the strength that we have, the inner strength that we have, and that we come away knowing how to tap into that inner strength. To tap into that inner strength, let me tell you straight off right now, it takes determination. Determination will enable you to tap into your inner strength. When you see those athletes and they're getting themselves ready to run that 100 meters, the 200 meters, the 5,000 relay, to do the hurdles. What's going to get them through, family, is determination. Those are individuals who have already made up in their mind, and have already, spoken to their inner self and their inner spirit, and have got all of their body and in alignment with their mind, to say that they are going to do this. They are going to do this no matter what it costs. And that is what it takes, family, to achieve success. And so I want everybody watching right now to recognize that you have that inner strength to accomplish whatever it is that you have set your mind to do. And once you add determination, you will be able, to achieve your success. Obviously, you have to be, determination will make you put the plan in place. Determination will make you identify what all of the inputs are that you need in order to acquire that success. Determination will make you do the research and everything else that you need to do to accomplish success. And you've got it in you, family. Absolutely have it inside of you. And Bookman Dutty certainly had it inside of him. Yes, family, Bookman Dutty certainly had the power and determination, and the power to utilize his determination as well to fight for our freedom and our liberation. Now, just to remind you that this is episode 9 in our series of the ethnic cleansing of Ireland. And we're continuing on that journey as we go through the book to Hello Barbados, and we're in chapter 10 of the book now. And in this chapter, it's going to be revealing for us the extraordinary courage and determination of our enslaved forefathers and ancestors on those plantations. It's going to, we're going to have to sit up and just give so much recognition and credit to those courageous ancestors of ours, because you're going to be hearing of their bravery. You're going to be hearing, of those whose names, most of them, we don't even know. That is, such a tragedy that so many of our foremothers and forefathers decided that they would rather die fighting, and they did die fighting. And we don't even know their names. That is such a tragedy. But obviously, we do know the names of a few, and we have to keep calling the names because they represent, all of those who they stood alongside and fought alongside for freedom. Our ancestors, family, they were incredibly brave. And, here we are from the comfort of our own homes now, I think, in a situation where most of us can't even really begin to imagine the sacrifice that was made for our freedom. And I think that if we were to really tap into and overstand the freedom, the sacrifices that was made for our freedom, we would be, I think, more likely to make sure that we value our freedom more, and we do whatever it is we can to be working towards our total liberation as a people. Because, whatever punishment we get today for standing up and speaking out cannot even begin to compare in any shape or form the brutality of the punishment that our ancestors faced when they decided that they were going to stand up and fight. When they decided they were going to stand and fight, they knew that that would mean torture. They knew that that would mean death. And they knew that before death would come some brutal, brutal punishment. But they refused to surrender, family, because their desire for freedom was so, so strong. Is our desire for total liberation of Africa and the Caribbean islands as strong as it ought to be? I hope it gets stronger after today's show, because, you know, our ancestors, they organized time and time again. You know, they resisted time and time again. They waged wars time and time again on those plantations, and they challenged the system. They challenged the system of violence and exploitation. And are we challenging the system today to the extent that we ought to be? Yeah, those ancestors of ours, they had what we called determination. And we need to get that determination back, because it's that determination that is going to enable us to fight when we need to fight, family. I'm so hot under the lights. I'm going to turn on this fan, and I hope that the noise from the fan doesn't actually interfere with my audio. If it does, please let me know. If you can hear the fan and it's interfering, let me know. Thank you. So here are a couple of images of a couple of courageous women who were also very much at the forefront of the fight. Don't think it was just the men who were out there fighting, beloved. No, the women were there too. Women like Nanny of the Maroons was out there at the forefront as well, fighting, you know, against our enslavers, fighting against those plantation owners. And yeah, they wanted their freedom so much. They took up arms and risked everything. They were prepared to risk their life for it. They knew the consequences. They knew that if they were caught, they would be whipped, they'd be branded, they'd be mutilated, they could be even executed. But they chose resistance anyway. They chose resistance. Yeah? They made up in their mind that they were going to resist, that they were going to fight. And that takes an extraordinary depth of courage and determination, family. Wow. So we rise up our queens as well as the kings who did the works that was necessary so that you and I, family, are not being branded today, so that you and I are not being whipped physically today, so that you and I no longer have to have the physical chains around our necks and around our feet and around our arms and ankles. Wow, we've got to celebrate our ancestors for their courageousness, and we've got to remind ourselves of the price that was paid for our freedom. Because had that freedom not already have been won, we would still be in chains today, family. Don't think that those enslavers suddenly woke up one morning with a change of heart and wanted and decided that they wanted to release us. No, that's not what happened at all. It was hundreds of years of fighting for our freedom and making, you know, the sugar economy unprofitable, unworkable, threatening the lives of those who were whipping and lording over us in such an inhumane way. Our ancestors stood up, and despite the odds that were being stacked against them, family, knowing the price that they would have to pay, knowing that that price could mean their life, knowing the punishment that would come if they were caught alive. Woo, woo, woo. They fought anyway. They fought hard. And, you know, today we're demanding our reparations, but are we really determined enough to get reparations? Because we know no one's going to give us reparations. We have to take it. But, you know, what would that look like? And then how many of us have got that determination to stand up and take what is ours. If we look to the Sahel, we see that, there are 3 countries standing together to take back what is rightfully theirs, their land, their minerals, their resources, control of their government, control of their army, control of their hospitals, control of the education, control of the decisions that are made that affect the everyday life of their citizens. They're taking it back. They're taking it back, and they never waited for permission. Because if we wait for permission to take back what is ours, it will never be given to us. And it was the same during our enslavement. Yeah. Ordinary men and women like us, ordinary mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, cousins, young people, old people, who were all in the same circumstances. Some might have been farmers, some might have been craftsmen, some may have been sons and daughters and cobblers and blacksmiths, bakers, whatever the profession, miners, farmers. They got together and they all decided with one thing in common. And remember, it wasn't everybody that was fighting. There were those on the plantation who looked like us who were fighting against us. Just like we have them today. Masa Picnic them. Yeah? On today's plantation, fighting against us. We have them today in positions of power, running a number of these countries, standing against the Sahel, sending the armies in to shoot down and kill their own people just to retain their position of power. We have them today, those who fight against us. But when you stand for truth and justice, history will exonerate you. And, today we're giving recognition to those who were prepared, yes, Brother Kwame, to fight to the death. Those who were prepared to fight to the death, they said, yes, enough is enough. And they made up in their mind to fight despite the circumstances, despite the dangers, despite the risks. They fought against the most brutal system. And that was the system of enslavement that today has been recognized as the most, inhumane crime against humanity. I forget the exact wording. You can drop it in the chat for me. But today, our enslavement is being recognized for the heinous crime that it was. The most brutal system that it was. But on those plantations, our ancestors fought. There were rebellions. There was resistance. We had ancestors who burnt down plantations, who burnt down the plantation homes, and they had decided whether they succeeded or not, that they was going to make the whole capitalist economy of the sugar plantations unprofitable. Wow. I don't know. I would have been out there with them family. Where would you have stood? Would you have continued on the plantation saying, you know what, I don't want to risk getting whipped and hanged and tortured. I'm just going to keep on digging, keep on farming, and keep on dancing? Or would you have been one of the runaways? Would you have been one of those who decided that you would rather risk freedom and fight for it and die fighting for it, if need be? Where would you have stood? Would you have stood with the freedom fighters, or would you have stood with those who kept it moving, kept their head in the sand, and were prepared to live with the whips on their back and can just complain about their situation? Excuse me. Drop a note in the chat, family. Let me know where you would have stood. And remember, if you want to interact, you do need to sign in to your YouTube account. Once you've signed into your Google and then your YouTube account, you will be able to interact with us here live. Yes, Brother Kwame, slavery was unjust, painful, and humiliating. And we're still suffering from the humiliation today. I'm going to come back to this presentation. I'm going to jump out of it now, and I'm going to go into the book that we are currently reading. Okay, so let me just come out of this presentation, minimize that here, and go back to chapter 10. I'm in chapter 10 of the book. I know some of you may have got this book. I'm not actually promoting the book at all. I'm just using the book because it's got some great sources. It makes reference to government letters, legislation that was being passed, numerous incidences that had been recorded that goes back to the mid-17th century. So it's a really good source of information that tells us what happened to our ancestors and those of us who were in Ireland at the time of Cromwell, when he decided that he was going to ship us all out of Ireland, first of all, to the Caribbean and also to the Americas. So I'm in the book, page 123, chapter 10, which is all about the revolts and the rebellions. That's why I started where I started in our presentation today. And those of you who've been following, you'll know that this book is primarily tracing the Irish that ended up in Barbados, but it also talks about those who were sent to Jamaica, Montserrat, and the Americas, okay? And so, yeah, it's interesting really to read that one of the greatest fear that those white planters had in Barbados was that the merchants, this is the greatest fear that the merchants, the planters, the militia, the assemblymen, and the government officials alike in Barbados had was that the enslaved Africans would all come together, revolt, and take over the island. And I would imagine that, our ancestors didn't realize the power that they had, that they could do that. That's why, they went along with a system for those hundreds of years, not knowing that at any time they could have revolted, they could have taken it over, and they could have just taken over the whole island. And that's where we are at the moment in our African and Caribbean countries. We don't know that until this day, the biggest fear that the whites have, those in government, those in business, those who are investors and everybody, the biggest fear that they have is that we as Africans will all come together and take back control of our countries, take back control of our islands, take back control of our minerals, our resources, our land, our political decisions, our economies, our healthcare. That's the biggest fear that they have. And we don't realize as a people that we have that power, and for as long as they can continue fooling us through their fooling system that they call the schooling system, for as long as they continue to fool us into believing that we don't have the power, then they remain in control for another day, another year, another decade. But there's going to come a time, family. There is certainly going to come a time, and I'm seeing it already in my lifetime in the Sahel region, where our formidable brothers have said, we're taking back our country. This is Africa. Yeah, and we are Africans. And this is our land, the land of our ancestors. Who are you as outsiders to dictate to us, our economy, our health policies, our educational policies, how we run our governments, who has access to our gold and our minerals and our resources. Who are you? And I said, no. Take up yourself, go on for your place, go on for your land where you done thief already from the indigenous people. Take away yourself, go back there, so, and leave us on our land, yeah, to do the works that we need to do for the citizens of this land. I'm talking about the Sahel country, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And to those nations who are thinking of joining them, we celebrate you. You will go down in history. And it's not an easy road, just as I was talking about earlier. They will mete out the wickedest, most heinous punishment that they can, to deter other countries from doing the same. And that's what they did on the plantation, to deter others from following behind those freedom fighters. Let's read a bit from this book. It's talking about, here we go. So the enslaved Africans, together with some so it's talking about the Irish servants and the Irish enslaved Africans, who together with some of the black slaves, these are the ones directly from the continent, had run away from their so-called masters' estates and were out in rebellion in, it says, ye thickets and thereabouts. So, Barbados wasn't as flat then as it is now. There was still a lot of growth, overgrowth, thickets, woods, forestry, so they could hide. So, they would take to the thickets and thereabout. There is no mention of the numbers involved, but they must have been considerable, as the council ordered Lieutenant Colonel Higginbotham to raise any of the companies of Colonel Henry Hawley's regiment to follow ye said servants and runaway slaves. And if ye shall meet any of them, to cause them forthwith to be secured, and to send them before the governor or some justice of the peace. But if any of the said servants and runaway Negroes make any opposition and resist his forces, then to use his utmost endeavors to suppress or destroy them. So clearly they're sending out a message to the regiment there. You bring them back to face our justice. And if you can't bring them back alive, then you do whatever you need to do to destroy them. This is the instructions that they had, or these were the instructions that they'd given to their army. I'll continue in the book, page 124. It appears from the minutes of the council that Lieutenant Colonel Higginbotham cannot have been very successful, as there are records of runaway servants and slaves launching attacks on the persons and properties of their masters. This is what I'm talking about. Would you have been with the runaways, with the resistors, with the fighters? Would you have been there? Or would you have remained on the plantation with your head bowed down, thinking, I don't want to get whipped until all the skin comes off of my back. I don't want to be hung and then have my head cut off. I don't want to be hung, drawn, and quartered. Where would you have stood on this? I mean, the repercussions, the consequences of being court family, it was no little something. It was no little something at all. Anyway, the records are showing that, the runaways were launching attacks on the properties of their masters. It said planters were ambushed, dragged from their coaches and hacked to pieces with machetes used in cutting the cane. So the same machete that I showed you in that image there, that Queen Nanny and co were holding, were the same machetes that they used to cut the sugar cane, and it was the same machete that they used to hack, these planters, many of whom probably would have been really wicked, really evil, and the ones carrying out the heinous crimes on the enslaved Africans. And they knew it was, if it wasn't them, then they would be the ones to face the brutal punishment. And so there was all this hacking going on with the machetes, and the ambushes were happening, and the planters were scared. So they were calling out the military, calling out the army and the regiment to go and find, these runaways and deal with them. The runaways, what they were doing also is they were taking the arms of the planters and the coachmen. So when these coaches were going between plantations or going about their business, they would hijack them, and they would hack to pieces the planters. They would take the guns and ammunition and whatever else was on those coaches, and then they would put those goods, it said, to effect on the militia that was hunting them down. So they would turn those same guns back onto the militias. So you can imagine, quite often, we hear about the incidences that involve the enslaved Africans being hung, being whipped, being slaughtered, but we don't often read about, the formidable resistance that they put up and what they had to do in order to fight for the freedom that we are enjoying today. The assembly, it says, was particularly concerned about the burning of the sugar fields, the mills and the outhouses, as it struck at the very heart of the economic structure of the island. That's right. That's why even today when we strike, that's why even today when we march, even today when we take action, we're looking at taking action that strikes at the heart of the economy, that brings the economy to a standstill. When we decide that we're going to boycott, it's bringing their economy and their system to a standstill. It's impacting on them financially. And these people care more about finances than they do about us as citizens and human beings. So our ancestors knew this. And so the action that they would take would strike at the heart of the economic structure of the day. And it would severely impact on the economy of that island. The number of runaway servants and slaves, both Irish and black, became so great, it says here, that the governor was asked by the assembly to mobilize the entire militia. The entire militia family were mobilized. Wow. And an act. So, an act was passed in Parliament. So not only were the planters acting, to do what they felt they needed to do to defend themselves on the plantations, they had the backing of Parliament. Parliament was passing legislation to back up whatever it was these planters wanted to do. So apparently the number of runaways was so great that the governor asked the assembly to mobilize the entire militia. As Act was passed on the 2nd of September, an act was passed rather on the 2nd of September 1657 to that effect, making it lawful to kill and destroy such runaways. Several engagements took place. The servants and slaves fought to the bitter end. You hear that, family? They fought to the bitter end. They fought, they chopped, they slaughtered. And this was happening on both sides. They were using the guns that they had captured from those coaches and turning it on the militias. They were using the machetes. They were using whatever they had at their disposal to fight against the tyranny of enslavement, to fight against that evil system that was being backed up by legislation, backed up by armies, backed up by militia groups, backed up, by acts of parliament. And obviously the MPs and all of them that would have been in the assembly meeting and voting for these enactments. So they fought to the bitter end and often sought death, knowing the tortures that awaited them if taken alive. In one engagement in October 1657, 20 of the runaways were captured after putting up a fierce resistance in which 12 militiamen and 30 of the runaways were killed. The remainder withdrew into the thickets, carrying their wounded with them. The captives, including 6 Irishmen, were lodged in the cage in Bridgetown. A court was quickly convened, and all the prisoners were condemned to death by fire. On the appointed day, a large crowd gathered to watch the sentence being carried out. We've read about this already in one of the previous chapters of how they would make a spectacle of an execution, and how they would draw up, seats and sit in the front row. Even the so-called ladies would sit in the front row and watch these awful executions and tortures. So on the appointed day, a large crowd gathered to watch the sentence being carried out. Among them were some high-born ladies who were given ringside seats in a special area reserved for members of the assembly and their guests. Sometimes the descendants of these MPs will want to try and give the impression that, their ancestors were in those assembly meetings fighting against enslavement, fighting on behalf of those Africans who were suffering. But here we're hearing that they and their wives, these high-born ladies and these gentlemen who were members of the assembly and their guests, pulled up seats. They were given ringside seats to watch the executions. The prisoners, stark naked, were nailed to the ground in the form of a cross, with pegs of hardwood driven through their hands and feet. Some of us think, that it was only, this mythical Jesus that went through the nailing on the cross. You're hearing here that it was a form of punishment on the plantations, that prisoners who were captured were actually brought out into the public view, stark naked, and then they were nailed to the ground in a form of a cross with pegs of hard wood driven through their hands and feet. Not even nails, pegs of hard wood. You know how painful it is just to get a splinter in your hand or to get a splinter in your foot. And here we are talking about pegs, sharpened pegs being nailed to the ground in the form of a cross through your hands and your feet and into the hard wood behind you. Wow, wow, wow. Once they directed you, a burning torch was then applied to their feet and moved very slowly up their bodies. So they wanted to make sure that death wasn't quick, and they wanted to make everybody witness what would happen to you if you joined a rebellion and you were caught. You too would experience this slow death. So not only are you suffering the agony of having those pegs, those wooden pegs being driven through your hands and your feet, but now here you are being slowly burned alive. You are alive, and they are applying a small fire starting from your feet and working its way all the way up your body. Wow. So a burning torch was then applied to their feet and moved very slowly up their bodies. They were then beheaded, and their heads were displayed on pikes in prominent positions in the marketplace. The owners were given £25 compensation for each slave killed or executed. Wow, wow, wow. And this is interesting as well because just to remind those of you who may be new that this book, To Hell or Barbados, The Ethnic Cleansing of Ireland, has been written by someone who is actually trying to follow, trying to research and investigate what happened to the white Irish. And he's found that these people that he's reading about, who he thinks are white Irish, are the ones that ended up in Jamaica, in Barbados, in the Americas, who became slaves and, who were part of the resistance. And I'm saying there may well have been a handful of white people, but the vast majority, almost all of the people who were ethnically cleansed from Ireland at that time, who ended up in enslavement in Barbados and in Jamaica, were not white people. They were Black people. They were Africans. And they're trying to cover this up, who the real Black Irish really were. They're covering it up because the day we realize that a significant number of us were actually transported from Ireland to Jamaica, Barbados, other Caribbean islands, and the Americas, then we will realize that we are the descendants of the indigenous people of Britain. That we are the descendants of the indigenous people of Britain who were transported from Britain to those plantations and required to live a life of servitude or enslavement. And that's just too much, isn't it, for the British to actually have to admit to, hence why they erased that history and have covered it up for so long. But you know how the saying goes, ho, 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 whatever's done in the dark at some point will surely come to light. Mm-hmm. And this is really interesting as well. And this is where culture as well, in the reading, should set off some alarm bells. Okay, family? This is where we ought to, when we're reading some of these books, it should jump out at us. If there's anything in here that's part of our culture, it should jump out at us. I'm going to read this paragraph, and I wonder if something jumps out for you in the way it jumped out for me. So the old minute books of the island show that no more than 20% of the indentured servants who were freed became farmers, overseers, or artisans. There is no record of what happened to the remaining 80%. Some may have been some may have joined the militia. A few became innkeepers or shebeen owners, sellers of illegal liquor, that is. And the remainder were probably the ones described by Governor Daniel Cyril as wandering vagabonds, moving constantly from plantation to plantation and inciting their compatriots to rebellion. Now, is there a part of our culture in there that just jumped out for you? Remember, this author is looking for white people who were enslaved and who became indentured servants. But all the way through the book, when you hear about what these people were actually suffering on the plantations, it's our story. It's not their story at all. It's our story. Those who became enslaved and those who became the servants, and were serving in those houses were not white people at all. They were Black people. And here in this paragraph, it's saying that according to the minute book, there was only about 20% of the indentured servants who were freed, what happened to the remainder of them? Okay, the remainder just were not freed, were they? They were left on those plantations. But the other thing is that of those who were freed, it is presuming that maybe they went on to do some sort of business. And one of the businesses, it suggested, was to run a shubeen. Now, I only know the Caribbean to know about shubeen. I never know, say, that come from Ireland and that we take that from Ireland to the Caribbean, to the plantations, the shubeens. Yes, man, those of you who are maybe not from the Caribbean and you don't know what the shubeen is, yeah? The shubeen is like a party, is an old house maybe that you would use to have a party, and you would sell liquor there to make money. And we call them shubeens. Like when our parents in the 50s and 60s came to Britain, they didn't have their pubs and clubs, and they weren't allowed. They were allowed, but they weren't welcome in the British pubs. They would not be served in those pubs. The people who were serving the drinks would refuse to serve our parents, and so they did what they know how to do. They'd have their own do their own thing, and they called that a shubeen. So on a Friday night, a Saturday night, you could go to the shubeen. And look here, right here in this book, it's saying that some of those who were freed may well have gone on to set up their own shubeens. So are we not talking about our same people? Oh my gosh. Wow. I thought that was really interesting. Let me jump forward and see what else I can find that's really interesting here. Yes, let me read this section here. Oh, I just need to turn on the fan again for a little while, family. I hope it doesn't interrupt too much, distort the audio too much. I'll turn it off very shortly. So yeah, we've been talking about our ancestors on the plantations and some of the and what they had to go through, and the depth really of the evil that they had to conjure up within themselves to fight and to resist the planters, having to chop up people, ambush coaches, seize the guns and ammunition, fight the armies and the militia groups. I mean, it was relentless. They had entire armies that were going through the thickets, hunting for them. Thank you so much, Dora Fell. Thank you. Let me know that the fan's not bothering at all. I can keep it on. Thank you so much. Woo, don't I need it? And so the planters and the members of parliament and those in the assembly were forever trying to come up with new legislation, new policies, new laws, new regulations to try and keep our rebellious ancestors, in check. So this is another system that they tried to introduce. And I just love it because, anything they try to introduce, our ancestors just saying like, nope, we ain't having it. We're not having it. So they introduced what they call, so to try and improve security on the island, the planters introduced a pass system, and they issued passes to all the free men and women. And these were Irish, it says here, free men and women. And they were supposed to carry these passes and these particulars around with them. And it would have information on there about their last occupation, the place of their residence. All the masters, the mistresses, and the overseers were required to demand that all Irish persons who came to their plantations produce their passes. So, there's nothing new under the sun, is it? So this was happening in the 17th century, and it was also happening in South Africa, wasn't it? In the 19th and early 20th century, to move around, you had to have your pass. I think it might even still be happening today. And if these people could introduce something like this in Britain again, they would do that. Yeah, because then they can restrict your movement. So anyway, they introduced this pass system that they gave to these free men and women who were moving around, and all of the masters and mistresses and the overseers, they were required to demand that all these Irish persons who came to their plantations produce their passes, and if they failed to do so, they were to be apprehended, flogged, and conveyed to the nearest constable. The pass system, it says, did not work. Why? Listen to what Governor Cyril had to say. As Governor Cyril was informed that runaway Irish servants that are in rebellion do pass up and down from plantation to plantation with counterfeit and forged testimonials, pretending they are free men or that they have liberties so to pass, and by that means have opportunity to accomplish their wicked purposes. We know what they're calling their wicked purposes, and this is what they had to resort to in order to defend themselves. And so we're hearing that, these supposedly free Irish men and women were the ones who were given the pass. However, it seems enslaved Africans were able to produce counterfeit passes to pass up and down as free people. So if they were able to do that, then those free Irish must also have been black. Is it not? That's what it says to me. Anyway, because the system didn't work, because these runaways were posing as free people and were using counterfeit forged passes and counterfeit forged testimonials, they needed to enforce stricter laws. And these are the sort of things that they were talking about. So stricter laws were enforced, including branding and the cutting off of the ears of those carrying forged passes. Just imagine driving without a driving license today, and they say, if you're caught, we are cutting off your ears, or we're branding you to recognize that you have committed this offense. Oh my goodness gracious me. Let me look to the chat and see what comments I've got going on in the chat. Brother Kwame says, Africans are the originators of the world. And don't forget it, Shanice. I won't forget that, beloved. Absolutely not. I think it's 20 series where I was looking at where I actually provided the evidence that we are the original people on every continent in this world. Rise up, beloved. Doravel, thank you for that message there. Sister Karen says, we don't hear about those torture in American schools. Caucasians try to hide or ban books with these horrible stories. That's right. They want us to believe that out of the goodness of their hearts, they passed an act in Parliament and freed us. They don't tell us, about the horrible tortures and abuse that our ancestors suffered on these plantations. Yes, Kwame's saying, Mama Karen, they are about divide and rule, divide and conquer. Yes, indeed. And when they hide this sort of history from us, as our beloved Sister Betty, Sister Adwa was saying, it keeps us off guard. We just don't know the wickedness of these people. And then, we get the cases like Nolan Adams, the cases of our young people, going out with these group of white boys. And then we wonder why these young black boys end up dead, or these young black girls end up dead, because, it's the wickedness is still in the DNA of some of these Caucasians. The evil and the wickedness is still in their DNA. And as much as some of them try to bury it, Nolan Wells, thank you, beloved, as much as some of them try to bury it, you know, it comes up. It comes up. Jealousy will bring it up. Hatred will bring it up. We heard, you know, last strong about the black towns, the successful black towns that were burnt to the ground because of jealousy. Stockholm, you know, they murdered the citizens of that black town and then took over the town, moved into the houses that the black people had built and were occupying. Who's to say that something like that would never happen again? And this is the problem that we have. If we don't know our history, if we don't know what our ancestors went through and what they suffered so that we could be free today, we could end up enslaved again because we don't realize and understand, the horrors of it. We take it lightly. Anyway, the past system didn't work because the runaway Irish servants and the runaway Irish enslaved and the enslaved Africans were one of the same. These were some of the rebellious ones who were passing up and down the plantations with counterfeit and forged testimonials. So to make it stricter, they introduced new policies, including branding and cutting off the ears of those carrying forged passes. And you know what, family? It says that even this did not stop the runaways. Even the threat of being caught with a forged document leading to you being branded like they would brand a bull or a cow, or knowing that you could have your ears chopped off if you were caught. That didn't stop our people from running away. Both Irish servants and slaves still continued to run away. In August 1657, Governor Cyril complained of the large numbers of Irish still at large, and that he was informed by the provost marshal that the Bridgetown cage was full. So even the prison was full of prisoners whose end was probably going to be the sort of torture that we talked about. It was full, and our people still continued running away from those plantations. Sometimes, we hear the stories and they try to make out that we were complicit, we were compliant, we were on our knees begging, we were just crying and bawling the whole time. No, they don't tell us, do they, about the resistance, about the fight in the face of all of that really awful potential torture if you were caught. And, if we knew these stories, we would know the kind of substance that we're made up of. We would know the determination that lies inside of us, and how our ancestors, despite the risk to themselves, what they went through so that we could be free today. We need to know this. Governor Cyril complained of the large numbers of Irish still at large, and that he was informed by the provost, the marshal, that the Bridgetown cage was full. Cyril demanded still more severe penalties, including execution for runaways, and this was granted. And the masters of the runaways were then compensated by the public treasurer with rates ranging from 20 to 25 pounds in cash for the executed prisoners. Wow. But our ancestors continued to run away. They continued to resist, and they continued to rebel and to fight. In 1686, several Irish slaves were arrested for being concerned with or privy to an intended rising of Negroes to destroy all the masters and mistresses. This was a massive, big plan. Wow. The objective was to seize Needleham Fort, take the arms from it, and take over the island. It was a well thought out plot. The slave chose a number of Irishmen who were to be sent into the fort with money to buy drink for the guards, and having got them drunk, to take the fort by force. All communication with the island was to be then cut off by the sinking of all the ships in the harbour to prevent the news of the revolution spreading. Bridgetown was to be burned to the ground, and the slaves were to kill all the masters and mistresses. At the last moment, before this plot was due to be executed, you always get one, don't you? Wow, wow, wow. There was a betrayer, a black slave woman, who overheard two of the conspirators discussing the details. Grasped them up. Apparently, this particular slave held a special affection for her mistress. 36 of the leaders, including the Irishmen, were arrested, tortured, then hanged, drawn and quartered. It was the last revolt in which Irish and black slaves took action together, according to this researcher that did the work of this book. Wow, family, our ancestors went through so much so that we could be free today. And we can't take that freedom for granted. And there's some of us, family, who might think, yeah, but now it's different. Now things are really difficult. Now things are really challenging. Now that we are free, we can't build our own towns. We can't build our own cities. We can't do this. We can't do that. That's why now I want us to jump back to the presentation. And I want us to just remind ourselves, of what we are capable of doing as a people. Because if within a generation after our freedom, we could have accomplished all of what we accomplished, and last strong, we were talking about some of the black towns that we built. Yeah, we were talking about some of those black towns that caused so much jealousy and so much resentment. It got burnt. They got burnt to the ground. Well, family, let's fast forward now to the life of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He was born just a generation after emancipation in Jamaica. And, he witnessed the hardships that his parents endured, that the citizens and the community around him actually endured. And, these were the descendants of those who were formerly enslaved. And we're going to be talking about some of the remarkable achievements of those recently emancipated enslaved Africans in Jamaica. Yeah, and obviously the other Caribbean islands who were able to rebuild their lives, who were able, to educate themselves, who were able to be enterprising, and who were able, to come together in unity and in strength. Let me put this down for a little while. Because, these family members of ours, they had a shared vision. And it was the vision of these inspirational ones that inspired Marcus Mosiah Garvey as well. And this is such an important message right there, because by you being an inspirational visionary family, you may not realize that you could be inspiring someone who could be a future Garvey. Yeah, and as we know, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, his vision inspired millions across Africa, millions of people, leaders across the world took up his vision and implemented his vision. His vision was a simple but powerful one. a message that was calling on us as a people to unite. He said, as a united people, we can transform our situation and we can create a new future. Yeah. And so we've been talking about resilience. We've been talking about the resistance of our ancestors and the hope that they had for a better day. They didn't see that better day. Yeah. And they didn't live to experience the better day that we are experiencing today, but they did the works and they died believing that one day, their children or their children's children would be free. And if our ancestors could have that determination inside of them to overcome, the enslavement that they suffered, to fight despite the torture and the violence that would be meted out on them, if they could face all of that and then on freedom build successful, thriving communities within a generation or two, what more can we achieve today? We need these stories because we need to know that that same ability, capability lies within us. Because if our ancestors were able to do that within a generation or two of being freed with determination, if we unite with the same determination today, we can achieve so much as a people. Wow. So this is Garvey Month. So we're going to continue to uncover some of the, forgotten stories of our history, that history that's been hidden in plain sight, the history that has been whitewashed, the history that has been buried. We're uncovering it. Every time I do my reading, I come across something new, and I hope that you're going to hear and find something new from this presentation today. So, some of the challenges that our ancestors are likely to face after abolition. Remember, our enslavement was formally abolished in 1865. And there were huge obstacles in the way of us as Africans, wherever we were, including the Africans in America. They didn't want us to acquire land. They didn't want us establishing our own businesses. They didn't want to educate us in their schools. They didn't want to help our children. As far as they were concerned, they wanted us to suffer. Yeah. But when our people come together and decide that we're going to do for self, wow. We built successful towns and successful villages. And as we know, back then what happened is that those successful Black towns triggered a lot of jealousy and a lot of violence from non-Africans. And in the presentation last strong, I gave the example of Slocum in Texas, that successful Black town that had, that was economically successful and prosperous. It conjured up so much jealousy amongst the non-Africans that they destroyed that town. Groups of armed white mobs came in and they hunted and they killed Black people as they were running, while they were in their houses. They slaughtered. And those who survived run away from that town, many of them never ever to go back. And those non-whites who didn't even build the towns took over the town. Are they not driving out Blacks today? Isn't it the same thing, but they seem to be doing it in a little bit more of a civilized way? As uncivilized as ICE is, it's nowhere near as bad as we know it can get. Just imagine, within, a generation of freedom, those enslaved Africans, within 45 years, spent 45 hard-working years building that town, building those houses, those businesses, the churches, the schools, the health centers, built it with their bare hands. And then these mobs just come in, slaughter, kill, and take over 45 years of hard work. And it wasn't just that one town where this happened. We're learning today that there are over 100 such successful towns in America post-enslavement. If we could do that straight after enslavement, how much more can we do today? So, as we know, slavery was formally abolished in Jamaica in 1834. Although it was formally abolished, we still had to work for another 4 years, or our ancestors had to give another 4 years of unpaid labor before they were officially, finally emancipated. Emancipation happened on the 1st of August, 1838. And that's why we celebrate the 1st of Mosiah. That's why here in London, we have our Reparations Day March and Rally on the 1st of August, the 1st of Mosiah. Not only is it the month when Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born, but it's also the day that is officially recognized as our Emancipation Day. And even though we're not fully emancipated, and even though we still haven't got total freedom, you know, it's a journey. We're going to get there. So slavery officially ended in 1834, and it was the rebelliousness and the resistance and the sacrifice of our ancestors, that brought about our freedom and the abolition of slavery. Let's not allow, the mainstream to suggest that they were the ones who gave us our freedom. They didn't. You heard what we had to go through, in order to make the plantation system economically unviable. And you heard, the awful violence that our ancestors had to resort to in order to fight for freedom. So even after the legislation, even after they reluctantly agreed to abolish slavery, they still made our ancestors work for another 4 years to give them 4 more years of unpaid labor. And they called that system apprenticeship. The apprenticeship system, 4 years of unpaid labor on top of the 350 years or so of free labor that they had from our ancestors. So anyway, ultimately we were victorious in terms of, getting rid of the iron shackles from around our ankles and that whole system of plantation slavery as it was back then. Our ancestors were victorious, and we have to celebrate them, for their resistance, for the rebellions. We have to recognize the sacrifice that they made and overstand that determination to bring about change, to break the chains of slavery, that determination that they demonstrated. We have that determination inside of us to make the changes that we feel needs to be made today, that we ought to recognize needs to be made today as well. And so let me just remind everybody, please, that the 1st of August, is a day that we have to take off work. It's a day when we have to pay homage. It's a day where we have to remember our ancestors, remember their sacrifices. It's a day that I think we all need to fight for. And the fight today is nowhere near as painful and as torturous as the fight our ancestors had to endure a couple of 100 years ago when they fought for our freedom. So let's take that day for our ancestors, to remember them, to honor them, to celebrate them. And if you're anywhere, you know what, not even just in London, wherever you are in the world, yeah, come and join us in Brixton, London, UK on the 1st of Mosiah, because we always get together. Well, we've been doing it for the last 12 years, every year, irrespective on the day that it falls on, the 1st of Mosiah, we come together to remember the sacrifices of our ancestors and to honor them and to thank them for breaking the chains of our enslavement. So put that date in your diary, 1st of Mosiah, 2027. Dr. Umar Ifatunde Johnson, he's going to be coming back to the UK as well on that day. So start saving from now so that you can be there with us for a very memorable, memorable day in the African calendar. Rise up. So after the British were forced to abolish slavery on the 1st of Mosiah in 1838, Black people in Jamaica, Africans in America, Africans, in Barbados, wherever we were, we faced that really complex transitional period from enslavement to freedom. And many of our people were forced off of the plantations, and many of us were happy to leave the plantations. But remember, when you first leave the plantations, you don't have a house, you don't have food, so you have to build your own independent houses, start your building your village, you have to get some kind of economic system in place. And there's all sorts of hurdles that you're going to have to overcome. You're going to have to plant your food. It takes time for the food to grow, and this was the Jamaica that Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born into. He was born at a time, like a generation after Emancipation, and everywhere that he looked as a child growing up, he would have seen the descendants of those formerly enslaved Africans, struggling, because that's what life was like where he was. Everywhere he looked, the children and the grandchildren of those formerly enslaved Africans who'd won their freedom were free, but most were landless, penniless, no food. Wow. And to make matters worse, the plantation owners refused to re-employ those enslaved Africans and pay them. After they'd given hundreds of years of free labor, they refused to re-employ them and pay them. And I think, I got to check the books, but someone in the chat will probably let me know. But I think it was at this point that they actually brought in the Asians and the Chinese. They would rather pay them a wage rather than pay the descendants of those enslaved Africans who had given so much in so many years and had helped them accumulate so much wealth. So here we are, people who have recently been freed, and we're happy that we've won our freedom. We're happy, that we're no longer under the whip, but we're also landless, penniless, and jobless. Yeah. And with little land, no wealth, not receiving any compensation for generations of unpaid labor, you can imagine the struggling that the families would have been going through. And that's why today, we are reminding the powers that be that reparations is due. Yes. And I know there's a whole, reparation has been defined very broadly, and there are a number of pillars, like restitution, repair, not just compensation, repatriation. There are a number of pillars to reparation. But we know that these people are not going to give us reparations from a position of weakness. They will only concede, when we're in a position of strength. But that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to remind them and to remind our people as well of what we went through and why The call for reparations is a just call, and why we are due reparations. It doesn't mean that we no longer, continue doing what we need to do to build our own cities and our own towns and villages. No, we're certainly going to do that, because no one's going to do that for us. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we fail to remind those people that our reparations is due to us and why it's due to us. And so here we are, generation after enslavement, families, African families across Jamaica, Montserrat, Barbados, all the Caribbean islands and the American, all trying to rebuild their lives from scratch. And all we had was our determination, our will to put in the hard work, and our resilience. That's what our people had. And Garvey, at that time, as he traveled through Central America and later the United States, he would have witnessed similar scenes of suffering. And at the same time, he would also have witnessed scenes where our ancestors were uniting and we were, starting to build thriving communities. So on the one hand, he would have seen the poverty, and he talked about that, the deep poverty that he saw, the struggles against discrimination and the lasting effects of slavery. He saw all of that, but then he also would have witnessed communities rebuilding after centuries of exploitation. He would have seen, the Black Americans and those, in pockets of the Caribbean, despite the enormous obstacles, coming together, rebuilding, buying land, opening businesses, establishing schools, creating newspapers, building strong communities, and these were contrasting realities. And these contrasting realities would have helped to inform him and shape his vision as well. But one thing he knew is that he felt he needed to do something to help pull our people up from the suffering. And he saw the progress that we could make if we came together as a people. And he was convinced that, if we could survive the plantations, then we possessed what it took to survive the aftermath. Despite the oppression, we could, he believed, rise above it. And family, when you see where we are today, doesn't it speak to you about our resilience and our capability? Look at where we're coming from. We're still on that journey of surviving, but we have to move from surviving to thriving, from survival to success. We've got to rise above all of the obstacles that are put in our way. Look at what our ancestors were able to do because of unity, because of self-belief, because of the fact that we were educating ourselves. We were becoming economically independent, and we had a shared vision for the future. And so, it was this conviction really that I think, despite all of the odds, him seeing communities rebuilding themselves, that would have inspired Garvey to wake up the millions of Africans across the continent and across the diaspora to have a vision to rebuild and to uplift ourselves as a people. He wanted us to know that we could do it. So just 18 years after the abolition of slavery in America, this is when Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born. And wow, his vision would go on to inspire millions. He became one of the greatest Pan-Africanist leaders the world has ever known. And wow, he was just waking people up politically, making us aware of our economic potential. And this is a man from humble beginnings, who had an early life of impoverishment in the St. Anne's region of Jamaica. His family wasn't privileged. He didn't come from a privileged family. His father was a stonemason. His mother, she worked as a domestic servant. They had their financial challenges and hardship. And he left school at the age of 14. But look what he was able to go on and accomplish, you know? And if the opportunities are not where we are, then sometimes we have to move and go to find those opportunities abroad because, or in another town. Marcus, he moved from St. Anne's to Kingston, where he became an apprentice in a printing shop. And that apprentice shaped him so much later in life, as we all know. That print shop where he was printing the newspapers, it was there that he discovered the power of newspapers, the power of the media, the power that it had to influence and shape minds and ideas, and how you could educate people through the newspapers. And he became active in the labor movement, through the trade unions. He was learning about politics, justice. He was learning about the struggles. And this is what we've got to make sure that our children learn. It's not just about them getting a mainstream education, because if they do and they don't become active in the community, they're not going to learn about the struggles. They're not going to learn about politics. They're not going to learn about injustice and how to fight against injustice. That this is, and these are the credentials that actually shaped Garvey. Wouldn't we want to shape our children to become like Garveyite visionaries with a determination to be successful and with the ability to influence, people wherever they go? Garvey, he traveled. Our young people need to travel, because it's from traveling that we can see where we are as a people. And at that time, he was witnessing the harsh conditions that African workers were facing wherever it was that he went. And he saw it was the same struggle everywhere. And it was in 1912 that Garvey traveled to London. And this, I think I come across it before, but it jumped out at me again. He actually studied law and philosophy at Birkbeck College. And I actually went to Birkbeck College and did some studies there myself, did some part-time studies. Now, Marcus Garvey, he went there in 1912 and he studied law and philosophy there. Maybe we should be encouraging our children to study law and philosophy, as well as obviously having a trade, because having a trade is critical, because you can become self-employed if you've got a trade. Anyway, for those of you who don't know where Birkbeck College is, it's in Bloomsbury Square in central London. Anyway, he attended evening classes there between 1912 and 1914, and he wrote for a Pan-African newspaper. He was also regularly, I found out, a spokesperson at Hyde Park. And, he was closely followed by a huge audience at Hyde Park. And he was also at the time very much in tune with the struggle for independence that was happening, around the world at that time. And all of this strengthened his belief that we as Africans should continue to fight for independence, and that we should fight as well to determine our own future, just as, other nations were fighting for self-determination. And one of the books that he said that impacted him in a profound way was a book that was written by Booker T. Washington called Up From Slavery. And it said that reinforced the importance for him of education, of economic independence, entrepreneurship, and very importantly, self-reliance. He said that self-reliance, entrepreneurship, and economic independence was the foundation for true freedom. So, family, according to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, if we are not self-independent, if we are not self-educated, economically independent, and if we're not pursuing, an entrepreneurial economic self-determining occupation, then we are not pursuing true freedom. And he returned to Jamaica after touring with all of these ideas that he had. And then he founded, in 1914, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And he had that powerful motto, didn't he? One God, one aim, one destiny. So that was so powerful, because that meant that whether you were Christian or Muslim or atheist or African spirituality, one God, one aim, one destiny for us as a people. And so, yeah, in his early days, he would visit Hyde Park in London, and he would go to the speaker's corner, and there, he would speak to crowds of people. He would share his views and his opinions, and he would have grown in fame almost, and he would become recognized as a speaker at the corner there. And in later years, he, as we know, moved permanently to London, and he still regularly spoke at Hyde Park. Just imagine going to Hyde Park corner and hearing Marcus Garvey talk. So as we know, he was the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. That was founded back in 1914, and that was about us achieving independence. It had a Black nationalist ideology, and it was all about celebrating our Africanness, our history, and our culture. And you could actually buy shares in the Black Star Line as well. And the Black Star Line was just one of a number of major enterprises that the UNIA actually established. They led by example, and he was showing us that we can be self-reliant, we can be economically independent, we can run our own businesses, we can have our own factories, our own manufacturing industries, we can do it for self. And he was leading by example. Rise up, brother Kwame says, Mama Shanice, you're right. They still think we are their commodity. Enough was enough. Our people broke our silence and fought back. Yes. Sister Betty says, slavery by another name, apprenticeship and indentured. Yes, indeed. For real. And Brother Kwame is saying that he's going to be in Brixton next year. Rise up, beloved. Look what that is a day, the first of Messiah, that we have to dedicate to remember and honor our ancestors. And Sister Betty says, and their descendants are still benefiting from slavery today. Absolutely, still. Kwame, it's a shame Garvey didn't go to Mother Africa. I understand he wanted to go to Liberia. Yes, that's right. But his spirit went ahead of him, didn't it, Brother Kwame? Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about some of the enterprises as well. They had their own building in New York. They had their own Black Star Line shipping company. They had their own African factories. That it was a corporate organization, an umbrella organization that at the time had a capital worth $1 million to fund and manage their own independent industries. Remember, we managed this at a time, where we were a generation or two from being slaves on the plantations in shackles and chains. Yeah, we managed to come together, raise $1 million, which was used to finance Black-owned businesses. And we struggle to raise 10,000 or 100,000 today as a people. Look what we were able to do back then, family. Wow, wow, wow. What's the time? Oh, let's keep it moving quickly. The UNIA had their own factories. printing shops, retail and food services, chains of cooperatives and grocery stores, restaurants and laundries. We had our manufacturing industries. We had factories that produced goods, including staple items and specialized commodities like black dolls. We had our own transport system and real estate businesses. We had commercial trucking services, commercial office buildings, meeting halls. Oh, my family. This is where we were within a generation or two, within 2 generations or so, up from slavery. Yes, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, if you look up some of his business accomplishments and what he was able to accomplish through the UNIA with the support of some formidable people around him. We had factories, as I said, that made black dolls, hotels, grocery train stores. We had trucking company. We built our own schools, built our own restaurants, had our own organizations, our own printing press. He started 3 newspapers, the main one being UNIA, that was published in Spanish, Negro World rather, that was published in Spanish and French. Yeah. His organizations bought 5 ships. We often just hear about 1 ship, but apparently he bought 5 ships. And these ships were used for international trade. We were trading with each other. We owned office buildings. I showed you the office building in New York that the UNIA owned. And they bought auditoriums. And I know that there were a number of them in the different towns where they had their UNIA headquarters. They had, it says here, 6 million members. And I know that that is an underestimation because I've heard numbers far greater than 6 million. But even 6 million is a huge, huge number. And we have branches in 40 countries. Well, I know, family, if I was alive during that time, I would have been right there serving, the UNIA. And he even started our own political party. And it's such a shame that that political party has been left to die. The People's Political Party. I believe there still is a People Political Party in Jamaica, but it just isn't functioning at the level that it should be, because it obviously lacks the determination that's needed to make it a success. And when you think that Garvey achieved all of this with just an 8th grade education, he was out of school by the age of 14, but then he went on to self-educate and also to take himself back into university to study law and philosophy. Wow. So if you've got young people who've dropped out of school, that doesn't mean anything. They're getting some life experience and then they can go right back in, So the UNIA represented the largest mass movement in African American history, proclaiming a Black nationalist back to Africa message. Wow, wow, wow. Here it's saying that there were 700 branches and in 38 states by the early 1920s. 700 branches in 38 states by the early 1920s. And that's just America alone. There was chapters, all over the world. Wow, wow, wow. And of course, he had the women in the movement as well. There was the Black nurses. That was a dedicated wing of trained female medical workers that provided the healthcare, the education, the hygiene education, the community nursing support. Just imagine, family, today, us being organized as a race in such a way that we can depend on our own Black nurses, our own Black medical staff for professional services to our race. Just imagine, rather than us having to go to another race to access their services, us being organized as we were back then so that we could deliver services to our own community. Wow. And of course, there were numerous formidable women members in the movement because, as the saying goes, behind every successful Black man, Yes, there's a powerful Black woman. That unity, the Black man, the Black woman, is powerful. I don't think we should underestimate the power in that unity between the Black man and the Black woman. Wow, wow, wow. Some of you may be aware of the case of the Black man who said that he would never date Black women because Black women are too ugly, dated a white woman who murdered him. Anyway, she's just been sentenced to 6 years in prison. She's already served 4 years, so she's going to be out in about 18 months or so for murdering her Black boyfriend. Yes, yes. He'd be alive today if he was with a Black woman, and he'd probably be thriving as well. So because the women, we know our role, and in the Garvey movement, the women were the foundational backbone in the UNIA, and we were serving as organizers, as fundraisers, as leaders, and we had prominent members in the UNIA like Amy Ashwood Garvey, Amy Jacks Garvey, and they had a formidable role to play. And they were rising up the women as well as delivering health programs and many other programs. Here's some images of some of the great women in the Garvey movement. I had to put these in when I was writing about Garvey. A voice came into my head. It was our sister Queen Nzinga who's written the book, Women in the Garvey Movement. And that voice in my head from her said, don't forget the woman them. Don't forget the women in the movement. So rising up, Amy Ashwood Garvey. She was the co-founder of the UNIA back in 1914 alongside Marcus Garvey. And she managed some of the early organizational works to build the movement. And she was a champion as well for international Pan-African feminism. And she worked right up tirelessly until she passed at the age of 72. Then we had Jamie Jacks Garvey, and she was Marcus Garvey's second wife, his first wife. She was his second wife, and she acted as his literary liaison, and she edited his papers, his works, and she also is responsible for writing up and pulling together all of his essays after he died. And she edited the influential Our Women and What They Think. That was her section in the Negro World newspaper. And she worked tirelessly up to the age of 77 before she passed in 1973, which is during my lifetime. She was still alive during my lifetime in 1973. And then we had Henrietta Vinton Davis. She was born in 1860, and she's a celebrated elocutionist, dramatist, and international organizer. And she held high-ranking administrative roles within the UNIA, and she was 81 when she passed in 1941. And here we have Adelaide Cassie Hayford. She was a prominent educator from Sierra Leone who aligned with the UNIA's philosophies to promote African cultural naturalism and girls' education. We have Audeline Moore, known as Queen Mother Moore. She was born in 1898, and she lived right up into my lifetime as well. She passed in 1997. And she was a pioneering American civil rights leader, Black nationalist, human rights activist. She was widely regarded as the mother of the modern reparations movement, and her activism spanned almost a century, and she worked alongside Marcus Garvey. I remember watching an interview that you can see on YouTube where she was talking about one of the meetings that Marcus Garvey was at, and I just love the way she tells that story. I've already told the story before, and because of time I won't go into it again, but check her out. She was formidable, and she's also recognized as a woman who mentored Malcolm X as well. And she co-founded the Republic of New Africa. And wow, Marcus Garvey just inspired her as well. And she went on to do so much works in the organization for over 60 years. And she passed age 98. You see, when you got purpose, age 98. And then here is a Queen Mother, Marianne Samad. She was Jamaica's best known link to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and she made a promise that every day she would rise up the name of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. From she was 17 years old, she made that promise, and every day of her life, she did the works, and she continued to keep his name alive. And now the whole of Jamaica knows his name, loves his name, and keeps his name alive. And she made Jamaica her home. She was actually born in America, but she made Jamaica her home in the 70s, and Jamaica certainly embraced her as one of their own. She was teaching, she was lecturing on Garveyism and Africa across Jamaica. While she was in the intellectual spaces, she was doing the works, and many scholars actually benefited from her knowledge of Marcus Garvey as well. And she died 3 days after her 99th birthday. You see, when you got purpose. And who's this one here? Who's this woman here? Doing the works. Long may she live too, because she have a whole heap of works to do. So let's round off with some closing remarks now and just reflect on some of what we've been talking about in this episode today, family. So, we were on the plantations with our ancestors, and we heard the suffering. We heard about the hardship, the struggles for survival after they were emancipated. We know what it took, for us to achieve the emancipation and the level of freedom that we have today. And if it wasn't for our ancestors, and they gave everything, they gave their life, so we owe them so, so much. And then, of course, we've seen that when our ancestors come back in unity, come together, we can actually build, despite the obstacles that are put in our way. We can build homes, we can build businesses, we can raise families, we can create thriving communities. We've also got to learn how to protect them, because when we become successful, there are those outside our race who jealous we. Yeah, just like how they're jealous in right now, the Sahel countries, and they just want an excuse to go in there and destroy it and tear it down. But we must not allow that to happen. Yeah, because if they look at what they did when Guinea decided that they didn't want to join, they didn't want to be part of the CFA. Yeah. When the Francophone countries were in a position to make a decision whether to go with France or go independently, that was in the early 60s. Guinea said they wanted independence. They'd rather, have freedom in poverty than opulence in slavery. Yeah. What did the French do? They destroyed the country. They called it, taking back everything that they had built during those colonial years, smashed up pipes, water pipes, everything they destroyed, put concrete down the toilets. They did that in Zimbabwe. This is what they do because they don't want to see us rise. But we know when we come together, family, as a people, there's nothing that can stop our rising. Marcus Mosiah Garvey has given us the vision, the economic vision for independence, the vision for self-reliance, the vision to rise us up as a people. And he led by example. He demonstrated how we could come together and how we can achieve so much within one generation. And make sure, family, that your children get a copy of this free book that I've written as a tribute to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, that you can download it free of charge. You just go to sistershanice.gumroad.com, and get a copy. You can leave a donation if you want, or you don't have to if you don't want to. But get a copy of that book because, I was so inspired by Marcus Mosiah Garvey myself, and I know that if you read his teachings and if you read his teachings to your children, they will be inspired and they will grow up to be great as well. And in case you don't know, I am the author of 6 books, and you can support my works by getting a copy of, one or more of my books. Why not make a book a gift to a family member or friend, because the gift of knowledge is the best gift that you can give to anyone at any time. And at the same time, you'll be supporting my work. So I want to thank you all so much for your support, family, for hanging on in there, and for supporting the works of this platform. Thanks in advance for sharing. Yes, we want to big up Baba Kwame Nkrumah, who was inspired, yes, by Baba Garvey. Let's big him up indeed. And to all of you, family, let's remember, as Brother Kwame says, Garvey lives, Mosiah lives. Yes, and rise up the Al-Kabalan revivalist movement as well for keeping Garvey alive. And if you want to hear more about the works of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, I am sure that on Monday on Galaxy Afiri Radio, the Al-Kabalan revivalist movement, they're going to be rising up Garvey like a storm, because it's the 17th of Mosiah. That's the day that Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born. Yeah. So you know that it's going to be big things on the Big G Galaxy Afiri Radio on Monday. I'll put the link to the radio station in the chat, or in the description underneath this video. Okay, so when you come back to the channel, it will be there. Rise up, Matt. Good to have you in the house. Rise up, rise up. To each and every one of you that have been staying with me throughout the show today, I thank you so much. Malcolm X's parents, yes, were members of the UNIA. Yes, indeed. And look how, being a member of that organization shaped the great Malcolm X. Yes. So there's so much that we can learn from our ancestors. Yeah. Oh, Kwame Osit, I'll tell you about it. And we've got to overs the power of the black man and the black woman when they come together. This race mixing and integration, it's self-destruction. It destroys that black family, which is what we need. Yes, Etesen, Kwame, rise up, rise up. So family, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Please do join me again, same time, next strong, 7 o'clock GMT time, 8 o'clock UK time, British summer time. Yes, and today it's been a show that's talked about from survival to success and our ancestors. It's a miracle that we're still here. It's a miracle that we are still here. And family, we've got a works to do. So to everybody who's out there doing the works, rise up, rise up. For those of you who are yet to get on board and start doing the works, even just download a free copy of the book and share it with family and friends. You will be doing something to contribute towards the upliftment of our people. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please do share the video. More love, more strength. You're hearing what we ought to be hearing in the school, colleges, and universities, but they're not going to teach us. So we've got to teach ourselves it here. Thank you, family. One love. Sister Shanice, out of here for now. Bye for now.